achieved.
What a mess UFC 196 has turned into. And there are two fighters who stand to get absolutely screwed. One of them being Stipe Miocic and the other one being Big Ben Rothwell. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC on Fox 18 event, which will take place on January 30th, featuring a 4-fight main card, which I'll be breaking down for you on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Now, as I referenced at the beginning of my little rant here, UFC 196, the Super Bowl card for the UFC, was scheduled to feature Fabricio Werdum defending his title against the former champion Cain Velasquez in a fairly anticipated rematch. Cain pulls out with an injury, as Cain traditionally does. Miocic says, "Yeah, I'll take the biggest fight of my life for the title on 2 weeks' notice." Less than 24 hours after he accepts and it's announced, the champ Fabricio Werdum goes, "Oh, hold up, boys. I was hurt too. I'm not fighting this dude injured. I'm out of the fight too." Obviously, I can see the reasoning for that. But now you've got Stipe, who earned his title shot, was looking at a scenario where, heck, I'm going to get a massive opportunity to prepare for a shot at the title, a normal camp. The UFC comes and basically says to him, "Here, 2 weeks, you want the shot at the title, Cain's out." If he doesn't take it, someone else steps in, wins the title, then suddenly you've got the new guy as the champ. Werdum is looking to get a shot at the title. Velasquez still hasn't fought for the title. He takes 2 steps back without even fighting because there's 2 guys that jump in front of him, hypothetically. If he does take the title fight, well, it's a massive fight against an extremely dangerous opponent, and he's only got 2 weeks to get ready for it, so that's tough as well. But on top of all this, now he's the only actual healthy heavyweight that was involved in this fight at all, and when you look at UFC 196, the card just isn't that strong without a strong headliner. I don't think the card's that good. Wonderboy Stephen Thompson against Johnny Hendricks in the main event is not a good enough fight, I don't think, to be a pay-per-view main event. Sure, fight night, but not a pay-per-view main event. The card needs a headliner. And you've got Miocic sitting here going, well, okay, what do I do? Do I have to fight again and win another fight to prove that I, should get a shot at the title? Now you're hearing Josh Barnett saying, I'll fight for the title if they want to pull me off and let me fight Miocic for the interim title, or if you want to put Ben Rothwell and I in the main event there. So again, you've got Miocic getting screwed because if they just move this fight I'm about to predict to the UFC 197 or 96 card, well, Miocic is out and you got an interim champion there getting a shot at most likely Fabricio Werdum afterwards. Or if they move Josh Barnett over, well, then Big Ben Rothwell gets screwed because a fighter he was actually originally supposed to face a couple weeks or months ago, I can't remember the exact time frame, in Miocic, is now fighting the title against the guy he was supposed to fight tonight. I guess the ideal thing would be to put Ben Rothwell against Miocic in the main event. Again, not a super strong headliner, but nonetheless, the UFC kind of set them up for the scenario with not making a very strong undercard with multiple big-time fights. Either way, very disappointing. The other option they could do, but it's kind of a risky one, is they could consider, if you look at Ben Rothwell and you look at Josh Barnett and you say the winner of this fight this weekend goes and fights Miocic for the interim title next weekend if you get, come out of it unscathed. And that is certainly a possibility. It's a risky one because you're waiting for a week out. It's tough. I don't know what the UFC is going to do. I hope Stipe doesn't get screwed in the process. I hope Ben Rothwell doesn't get screwed. I hope Josh Barnett doesn't get screwed. And generally, I'm very disappointed, to say the least. Rant over. Now, looking at this card, it's a pretty fun-looking card. I'm going to give you all my predictions as normal. Check out the prediction panels, breakdowns of the fights on my website. The bet packs, I'm coming off a so-so bet pack. I went 8-5. I had some nice upset predictions with Dominic Cruz. Also picking Eddie Alvarez in a game plan that pretty much worked out as exactly as I said it would. Leading to victory. It wasn't pretty, but he got the job done. I also had Francisco Trinaldo. The bet packs broke even, but they still had a lot of solid information overall, so please check out the results there. $10, or you can buy, I think, the next 4 cards. I believe it's going to be for $35, so still a pretty worthwhile endeavor. Either way, I've rambled on for a lot of time. We've got 4 very good and fun picks to look at, so let's get to that first main card prediction. The first fight of the night takes place in the UFC's welterweight division as Super Sage Northcutt, undefeated at 7-0, takes on Bam Bam Brian Barberena with a record of 10 wins and 2 losses. Now, this is actually not the original fight, as Sage Northcutt was originally penciled in to face Andrew Holbrook, so Barberena stepping in to replace Holbrook on, it's less than 2 weeks, more than a week, just over a week's notice. He did debut in the UFC on short notice as well, so he's not unaccustomed to this scenario, and they are moving up to 170 pounds from their traditional 155-pound weight class. which to accommodate that late notice of the weight cut isn't nearly as significant. Now you're looking at Northcutt. This is his third time fighting in the UFC, which is shocking. Third time fighting in the UFC because it's only taken place over 4 months. He's on a 50-day turnaround since his last fight. And for Barberena, this is also his third UFC appearance, but it took him 13 months to get there. He's actually been very vocal in the media regarding how he sees it's not fair, the treatment that Sage Northcutt is getting for the quick turnarounds and the extra money he's getting paid despite starting out very early in his MMA career and very early in his UFC career. Nonetheless, we're here to talk about who's going to punch each other in the face more often. Both men are 6 feet tall, 1-inch reach advantage for Barberena. Sage is 7 years younger, extremely young actually, and both men are fairly big 155-pounders. Now Northcutt, we look at Sage. He's a dynamic striker, a lot of front leg kicking techniques. He manages distance very well. He has excellent footwork, which helps him with the distance management. He's very quick, and as I said, he puts a lot of can do a lot of damage with his strikes. When he fought Trevino stood right in front of him and allowed Northcutt to really get off. In the second fight that Northcutt took part in, Cody Pfister had a lot of success early on, pressuring him and really jamming him up and eventually putting him on his back. Once Northcutt was on his back, he actually spent a lot of the first half of the first round there. He was able to use some overhooks to tie up Pfister. He was rolling his hips. He was sticking his knee to try and create separation, but not offering a ton of offensive, offense off his back. He eventually earned a stand-up from the referee, which was a little bit questionable, as I thought Pfister was working. And that appeared to be maybe a chink in his armor, if you will, an area in which Barberena could look to focus on to defeat him. Question is, does Barberena have a good enough wrestling background to explode? He got back to his feet, scored a big takedown, landed some massive elbows, a lot in a hurry, really flurried and did a lot of damage. We saw the same thing against Francisco Trevino. Eventually led to an arm triangle attempt, which did not work. Once the second round started again, another exchange, a quick guillotine grab, really cranked on it and put him away. So both his victories have come on the mat, one via submission, one via stoppage. We did see, despite the fact he's known for a finisher, his cardio looked very fine coming into the middle round against Cody Pfister. But again, that's something that can be tested in a much more grueling fight, which I expect Barberena to really test him with. For Brian Barberena, he's a very tough fighter. He's willing to engage, he's strong in the clinch, and he's a knockout threat. He's willing to take a shot, to land a shot. Might not be the best strategy here. He was getting routinely cracked with the right hand of Joe Ellenberger in his first UFC fight. And he was getting absolutely blasted with high kicks from Chad Laprise and a turning side kick. He was standing right there. He's very hittable. He had issues with the speed, volume, and technical skill of Chad Laprise. When you look at those are things that all Northcutt should have in his favor in this fight. But one advantage that, or at least positive going for Barberena here, he's a southpaw, which could create some issues for Sage. He's aggressive. He throws some very nice inside leg kicks, which is something, if he can land them with routinely on Sage Northcutt, it could take away some of his base and not allow him to get his kicks off as easily. He does, use a lot of movement, a lot of feints, try and set his opponent off. Some decent combinations, nice straight punches, quick, minimal wind-up. He will work some short elbows in close, and that's probably where he needs to do a lot of his damage is in the clinch. Don't stand at distance, really jam him up and get in tight. But another area we have seen Barberena struggle is his takedown defense. He was taken down 4 times by Jake Ellenberger. He did get back up, but again, he stands right in front of his opponent, and that opens him up to being put on his back. When you look at Barberena, he lost that first round against Joe and against Chad because he tends to be a bit of a slow starter. And, the reason he was able to come back and beat Jake Ellenberger is Ellenberger looked clearly slower in the second round and much more, he was just simply worn down, and Barberena capitalized on that. For my money, Barberena has to make this an absolutely grueling matchup. Test Sage, bust him up in the clinch, take him down, and just hit him with everything you can and really make him want to quit. He can't stand and trade with him. He can't sit in front of him and take damage when he's going to take a lot of damage when closing the gap. I'm not a huge fan of the way he enters that close encounter area. I think the short notice scenario is not the greatest situation for him. I think Sage is going to find success at distance, but look for him to score takedowns when Barberena does try and close the distance. I think Sage Northcutt's going to break him down with elbows on the mat. He's going to eventually work towards a submission, and my prediction is Sage Northcutt to defeat Brian Barberena by submission. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's bantamweight division. It's a fight I've had a lot of difficulty breaking down, and I went back and forth on, as the 14th ranked Iuri Alcantara, with a record of 32 wins, 6 losses, and a single no contest, takes on the fast-rising Jimmie Rivera with a record of 18 wins and 1 defeat. Now, Rivera comes into this matchup on a 17-fight winning streak. That's absolutely ridiculous, and he's got some solid wins outside of the UFC and in the UFC now. As I said, 2 wins inside the octagon. And he's coming off a split decision victory over Pedro Munoz, which took place in Brazil, which is a pretty good notch on a young fighter's belt, if you will. I was going to say cap, but belt makes more sense. For Alcantara, he's kind of struggled with a little bit of consistency, despite the fact he's won 4 of his last 5 fights. And I'll tell you why. He lost to Frankie Saenz, which is a major upset. He lost to Uriah Faber, which tends to be the norm for most, or has been the norm for most bantamweights. But he had a close split decision win against Russell Doan that many felt he lost, and a close split decision win against Wilson Hayes, which a lot of people viewed similarly. So he's had some fights that he got the nod in, but he didn't perform as dominant as most people expected him to. Physically, the Brazilian has some massive advantages here. Iuri has a 5-inch height advantage, is the younger man by 9 years, which is a pretty big number there. For Alcantara, he's a BJJ black belt, 14 wins by knockout, 12 wins by submission, 7-4 on the scorecards. His only TKO loss in his career came via injury earlier in his career. I believe that he has a submission loss too, also much earlier in his career. When you look at Jimmie Rivera, 4 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission. He's 12-1 on the scorecards. Only loss came in his second pro fight, and it came by split decision. So this guy has been in every single fight he's taken part in. For Rivera, he comes from a high school wrestling background. He's a good volume striker, and the output was his key to success against Pedro Munoz, and probably will be in this fight too if he is to pick up the victory. In the UFC, he hasn't really shown his wrestling offensively. It's been more defensively, defend off takedown attempts and keep things vertical when people did try and take him down, mainly Pedro Munoz. But he has several pre-UFC fights where the takedowns and top control were the key to his success in grinding out decisions. He did pick up 3 knockout victories prior to his last fight. He hurt his last opponent. Against Marcus Bramage, he landed some quick flurries, eventually cracked him with a big right hand and finished him. He also hurt Munoz with that right hand as well. He throws nice, short, crisp combinations, doesn't force anything despite being kind of a muscular fighter. Likes to rip to the body, which is a very effective technique. He mixes in a very quick and stiff uppercut. He has some very nice leg kicks. And look for him to throw 2 to 3 punch combinations and finish with a low kick or a leg body kick, sometimes going with that left kick to the body. Very effective technique. I really like the way he throws it. He can counter-strike effectively as well. And one thing it can get you in trouble, but still it's a solid thing to do when you're looking to be a volume striker. Every time his opponent hits him, he likes to get back and throw more volume. Every time Pedro Munoz hit him, he was responding with multi-punch combinations, going to the leg, going to the body, going to the head, and just, you hit me once, I'm going to hit you 4 times. He also got tagged a couple times in that fight. He was hurt with the right hand. He was kind of getting backed up in round 2 and not throwing as much volume, which is something he's going to need to work on to continue putting up those big numbers. Now, for Alcantara, the key to beating him so far in the UFC has been wrestling and takedowns. He lost round 1 versus Leandro Issa in his last fight because he got put on his back, and he lost several other fights because he was taken down. He's dangerous off his back, but he tends to get stuck there. He's a little bit too complacent once he's put there, and he will slow down if he's forced to work hard. He doesn't have that gas tank to fight a full 3 rounds at the pace he starts out with. He's extremely dangerous as far as finishing capabilities are concerned, but he has just 2 finishes in his last 11 matchups. We did see him absolutely obliterate Von Lee with a massive left hand in the very early seconds of that matchup. And again, like we talked in the last matchup, he's a southpaw, which opens up big kicks to the body of his opponent. That left kick to the body, look for that, and also that big left hand, he can work that in, and that can be difficult for opponents to pick up. He comes from a Muay Thai background. He's got a nice step-in knee. Against Issa, he landed a very straight left hand that hurt him and really took him out of his game plan there. He's an exceptionally fast starter as well. He tends to get off to very quick starts, comes out very aggressive. Doesn't throw a ton of volume, though, after he kind of settles in, averaging just 2.47 strikes landed per minute, which is a bit of a concern. He likes to sit back and kind of pot shot his opponents. Again, he has power, but against Rivera, he's going to need to hurt him as he comes forward. Rivera has 2 avenues to victory in this matchup. The first can be, and he can combine them or work one or the other. Either use his wrestling or his volume striking to outwork Alcantara. If Iuri can outscore him, can score the early stoppage, I think if he can't score that early stoppage, my apologies, I think Rivera's pace too hard for the Brazilian to keep up and win 2 rounds, especially the first 2 rounds. And my prediction is Jimmie Rivera to defeat Iuri Alcantara by decision. We move now to the co-main event of the evening, and it's a fight. It's in the heavyweight division. It's a fight. It has me checking the major MMA news outlets to see if this fight's been broken down. Someone's been shipped off to UFC 196. Both of them have shipped off to 196. I don't know. Either way, we still have it on Fox as of breaking this fight down. The 8th-ranked Josh the Warmaster Barnett, 34-7-0, former UFC heavyweight champion, taking in the 7th-ranked Big Ben Rothwell, the current record 35 wins and 9 losses. Now for Rothwell, he comes into this matchup riding a 3-fight winning streak. He's 4-1 in his last 5 fights, and he's trying to earn some respect in the heavyweight division. He feels he's being overlooked, and I have to agree with him. He's also trying to earn a future title shot with a win here. Certainly get one step closer. He did have a fight with the much-maligned Stipe Miocic, canceled in the not-too-distant past. Unfortunately, it didn't materialize. I don't know if that's for better or worse. Looking at Josh Barnett, he's coming off a matchup that ended a 2-year hiatus from competition. He's a winner in 3 of his last 4. Some people question his focus taking a big break like that, talking about that he could walk away from the sport at any point in time, and how he's kind of looking at the opportunity to fight for a title, or at least trying to work his way into that title conversation. So you got to wonder, is he focused on this matchup, entirely? Physically, Rothwell, 1 inch taller, standing 6'4", same reach advantage at 78 inches, or same reach, no reach advantage. Rothwell, I expect him to come in heavier, anywhere from 5 to 15 pounds heavier than Josh Barnett, and he is 4 years younger. For Barnett, he's a catch wrestler / submission fighter. 20 wins by tap out on his career. He also has 8 wins by knockout. He's 5-3 on the scorecards. He has been submitted twice in his career, one coming via punches, the other coming via injury, both against Mirko Krokop, and he's been knocked out twice. For Big Ben, BJJ purple belt, 20 wins by knockout, 12 wins by submission. He's 3-3 on the scorecards, and his durability is a bit of a question mark because he has been knocked out 4 times and he has been submitted twice. Keeping that in mind, Barnett would probably benefit most from a grappling heavy attack versus Rothwell. Takedowns, ground and pound, and submissions. If he can't get Big Ben to the mat, which some people have had success doing, others have not, if he can't get that fight to the ground, he needs to work his clinch game. That's the next best option. Knees, he has a very nice uppercut in the clinch, works some body shots, force Rothwell to carry his weight. Also, Barnett can use that collar tie, which we saw against Frank Mir. It allowed him to land knees and uppercuts, eventually working some elbows. Really pushes his opponent to the cage. He eventually stopped Frank Mir with a big knee in this position. Barnett can work at distance. He's not a K1 level striker by any stretch of the imagination, but he can work at distance. He has some decent low kicks. He'll go to the head and body as well. And we did see Brandon Vera have a lot of success scoring with kicks like that against Ben Rothwell. They weren't hurting them, but they certainly were scoring points prior to the finish in that matchup. We saw Barnett sit back and trade with Nelson. He hurt him a couple of times with a big right hand. He's got a pretty solid left hook as well. And he will punch his way into the clinch, which is a pretty good entry against a guy who can throw his heavy leather like Big Ben can throw. Now, looking at Rothwell, he's incredibly durable. He is at his best and most effective when he cuts off the cage and uses pressure, as we saw against Brandon Vera. He eventually finished that fight when he got absolutely crazy and started coming forward with all that weird movement, unloaded, and eventually put him down. He's at his best again when he can work his way into range and exchange with his opponent. He trusts his chin. He was eating some big body shots against Vera. He was coming forward. Brendan Schaub actually dazed him with a beautiful spinning elbow, but eventually when he closed the gap, Rothwell knocked him out. I don't like the way Ben is willing to take shots. He is durable and he's trusting of his ability to take that damage, but still, if you can't stop your opponent, that's not a good thing. He leaves his body open. He was getting some crack with some big body kicks in the Overeem fight as well. Matt Mitchell was having a lot of success, cracking him with some shots as well before the submission. What Rothwell does well, he throws a nice uppercut, which he hurt Overeem with. He has a strong right hand as well. Not a ton of combinations or volume overall. And he tends to telegraph his uppercut by tilting his head and slapping it in there. And if his opponent can anticipate and see that coming, they're going to capitalize on it, or should be able to at least avoid it. What Rothwell, he had some trouble fending off the takedowns of Gabriel Gonzaga and Cain Velasquez. He is a decent grappler in his own right, but I talked about, Josh Barnett may look to exploit that as well. Another thing, when you look back at Rothwell's fights and his recent, success, he gets hit a lot, which can cost him a decision, and he was losing fights against Brendan Schaub, Alistair Overeem, Matt Mitrione, and even Brandon Berry was getting tagged with some big shots, and it was the volume and quality of strikes were certainly not in his favor prior to getting finishes in all of those fights. For Barnett, he needs to be careful working in close with his clinch attack. He leaves himself open to getting tagged when he does fight in that position, so he should try and focus on getting the matchup to the ground. Push Rothwell, try and tack some of that cardio, force him to carry that body weight. Barnett needs to stay busier, work in that clinch, land strikes in close, possibly land a couple of takedowns. And normally I don't pick heavyweight fights to go the distance, but my prediction is Josh Barnett to defeat Ben Rothwell by decision. Or a submission, but I'm going to go with decision. We move now to the main event of the evening. It's in the UFC's light heavyweight division, and it features the number 2 ranked Anthony Rumble Johnson with a record of 20 wins and 5 losses, taking on the 4th ranked Ryan Darth Bader with a record of 21 wins and 4 defeats. Now, the winner of this fight most likely gets the shot against the unannounced but highly anticipated Daniel Cormier-John Jones matchup. I feel Bader should already be fighting for the title at some point, especially if Jones wasn't ready to come back. But to introduce a little bit of new blood into the scenario, nonetheless, we have this fight. It should be fairly good. Bader has won 5 in a row, including wins, upset victories over Rashad Evans and Phil Davis. For Rumble Johnson, he's coming off a win over Jimmie Manawa, which was preceded by his title fight loss against Daniel Cormier, which ultimately snapped a 9-fight winning streak. Physically, Rumble, 4-inch reach advantage. He is 1 year younger. They are the same height at 6'2". Looking at Ryan Bader first, he's a former NCAA Division I wrestler, BJJ purple belt, 6 wins by knockout, 4 by submission. He's 10-0 in the scorecards, which is very impressive. Of his 4 losses, 2 have come by knockout, 2 have come by submission. They've come against elite competition and Tito Ortiz in shocking fashion. Looking at Rumble now, NCAA junior. He was a junior college wrestler, 14 wins by knockouts. The guy has incredibly face-melting power. He is 6-0 on the scorecards, which is shocking. Not shocking, but still, it's not a number you'd expect to see considering his issues with cardio over his career. He is 0-4, though, in fights ended by submission, and he has 1 TKO loss on his resume, which came via brutal eye poke against Kevin Burns, which is really weird, and that he avenged ultimately the knockout the next time they fought. I believe it was in his next matchup. And that was back when he was fighting at welterweight, which is still mind-blowing when you consider that. Now, the big questions when you look at this scenario are 2 things. Bader has developed, since his loss to Glover Teixeira, he's really developed into a strategic fighter. For Rumble Johnson, he is a put my head down and smash you fighter, aggressive power striker. But there's that question, is that cardio there to be exploited? Can Darth Bader do that? For Johnson, we saw the wrestling aspect of the fight against Daniel Cormier ultimately cost him. It wrecked his cardio and took him out of that matchup. Phil Davis, though, not able to land takedowns. Could not take him down. It didn't tire him out. And it wasn't a good result for Mr. Wonderful as Johnson took it to him over 3 rounds and won a decision. For Rumble Johnson, his takedown defense has been pretty good outside of the Cormier fight. He stopped all 8 of Phil Davis's attempts to take him off his feet. And Cormier, it took him 8 times to take him down, on 3 occasions. So still, Cormier, a very good wrestler. Johnson still had some success stuffing his takedowns. For Bader, he landed 1 takedown in each of his wins against Phil Davis and Rashad Evans. So they weren't the focal point of his success. But when you look at the wins over OSP and Rafael Feijão, he landed a combined 16 takedowns, so that's where he used his wrestling, and it was very effective. Will that be his key to his success here? I would have to think so. If he can't land takedowns, can he get the nod in a similar fight to what we saw against Phil Davis and Rashad Evans? Neither of those guys came forward like Rumble Johnson did, and that's going to pose a problem, I think. AJ likes to move forward, and he comes forward with confidence. He sits down in his punches, and he throws big strikes. Now, we saw against Jimmie Manuwa, who was able to last the opening round, and Johnson won the opening round, Manuwa held his own. Rumble was breathing pretty heavy going into the corner. It didn't seem to really affect him that much as he came out and knocked him out shortly thereafter, but still, it's always a concerning sign. Rumble throws exceptionally hard leg kicks. He throws them. He'll go to the body. He'll go to the head as well. He has an absolutely massive right hand. He has power in both hands. He knocked Manuwa out with the right hand, and he can work in the clinch where he can generate a lot of power, land knee strikes as well. Against Manuwa, he landed a takedown. He has massive ground and pound once he gets there. He likes to get his opponents back, control it with his left arm, and feed them rights, and that's how he knocked out Alexander Gustafsson. If he can do that here, he should have similar success against Ryan Bader. Now, what we've seen with Bader of late, a lot of lateral movement, a lot of, in there and resetting. He'll snap a left jab off, and then he moves away. A lot of single strikes. He tends to lunge in a little bit when he does his attack because he's trying to fight at distance, and his ability to close distance just isn't as fluid as a Lyoto Machida-type fighter. Now, he has lots of movement. He tries to remain elusive, but it can inhibit the effectiveness of his striking because he is trying to strike over big distance. He throws a big overhand left that a lot of times is just a windmill strike. It's not going to come close, and it's just out there waiting to be missed or countered, if anything. He does have some nice kicks, though, and that was one of his key weapons against Davis. Lots of hard body and leg kicks. Threw him a little bit against Rashad Evans, not nearly as much against the overhand right, but he hasn't knocked anybody out since 2011. That's a long time for a guy who does seem to have some power. He has a tendency at times to move forward. He'll keep his chin tucked and his hands up, but there are instances where he'll move forward with his head up, or he'll even move back after an exchange with his head up, and you're just asking to get your block knocked off if you do that. Against Rashad Evans in the second round, he was getting backed up a lot once Evans committed to moving forward and attacking, and that seemed to be a kind of a turning point in that fight, despite the fact that Bader won it. And what we saw is Bader went from being elusive to actually running away and evading his opponent. It wasn't a strategic move, it was a defensive move. Big thing in this fight, it's a 5-round matchup. So far, Bader, one fight going 5 rounds against OSP. Rumble Johnson has never, even though he was booked to go that distance with Cormier. The cardio edge would favor Bader, but he has to make Johnson work in order for that to show up. He has to avoid, he can't, avoid him and stick and land single shots. That's not the strategy that's going to beat Rumble. He's got to wrestle him, and he's got to out-wrestle him, but that brings him into the danger zone. Can Rumble hold up over 5 rounds if he can't finish? I'd say against Phil Davis in that type of fight, he can. He still looked very good. He was throwing a lot of strikes after 3 rounds. He looked fresh and dangerous. Most likely, though, I think he catches Ryan Bader during an early exchange. I think he's going to force him to back up, and Bader's eventually going to get the cage cut off, and that's what Johnson has to do, cut the cage off, not chase him. I think we're going to see Bader get pinned along the cage eventually, and Johnson's just going to tee off on him, similar to what he did against Antonio, or Little Nog. And my prediction is Anthony Rumble Johnson to defeat Ryan Bader by knockout. So those are my 4 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC on Fox 18 event. All of my 9 preliminary breakdowns will be available at KamikazeOverdrive.net. Please check them out. I really hope the UFC goes back to some 5 and 6 card main card fights, because the 9 prelim fights is really breaking me down. It's a lot of writing to do, especially when you have fights getting canceled like we had last week. Just pull the fight. Stop finding late notice replacements. It's exhausting. Nonetheless, please consider buying the bet packs. I've had success. I had 3 pretty solid upset picks on the main card last week. I made a solid bet of my own at the last second, picking Eddie Alvarez and parlaying it with Dominic Cruz by decision. But certainly, I think I've doubled your money in the last 6 shows. And prior to that, I had a better run. So it's paying out fairly decently. It doesn't pay out every week. Last week, we basically broke even. Nonetheless, it's doing fairly well. It's only $10, or you can buy the subscription and save yourself some money. I appreciate, as always, you guys tuning in. Follow me on Twitter, like my Facebook, subscribe to me on YouTube. Make sure you check out that cool calendar I have at the top of my website. It shows you all the events for each month. You can see the poster, all the information about the event, the entire card, and afterwards you can see the results. I'm putting a lot of work in there. I'm getting a lot of help as well developing that. So please check that out. I'm trying to make that a fun aspect of my site that people utilize to the fullest extent. Also, you can email me as well. If you want to email me and ask me questions, I'll do my best to respond. I have a lot of guys that I talk with throughout fight week, and they give me advice, they give me their opinions, and I like to do as much back and forth as I possibly can. Follow me on Twitter, again, as I said, because I like to try and post a lot of information during the fights and talk about what I see. I can't always do it, but I'll do my best to stay as active as possible. And on that note, and I'm stealing this from one of my followers who I email back and forth all the time, let's get him this weekend, and may the judges be with us. Take care, guys.